Hi, I'm Liz O'Riordan, and today I am speaking with Lynne Connolly, who, as you know, is Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Aberdeen. And we're going to be talking about her experience of working with secondary cancer and what advice she would give to others about supporting people managing work during or after cancer treatment. So perhaps, Lynne, could you start by introducing yourself and telling us what you do?
Of course, and thank you for having me today. I feel this is a really important message to get across, and part of that is personal, but part of that is about the work that I do and what I'm passionate about. So I have obviously a corporate background, but the work that I do just now is in inclusion in the workplace, and I think that's what hits at the heart of what we're talking about today, not ruling out people because they don't fit a normal mold of what would necessarily work in a workplace that's run in a particular way. So instead of talking about career history, I thought I would just talk a little bit about me, because I'm really passionate about it's who you are, not what you are. And a job title can give only so much, but I'm also a mum to two teenagers who I've brought up through this cancer diagnosis. Through that time, I've worked flexibly, and I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I've got passions and drive around equal chances into the workplace. And so that's where I come from in all of this. And I think it's a really important point just to pull out, which is cancer hits at the heart, as does any other invisible illness and illness. I'm only speaking from a particular aspect today, but it hits at the heart of you as the person and the identity that you have, your identity being the characteristics you would talk about and assign to yourself, the person who you feel and others feel that you are. And cancer goes to the root of every single one of these. And I think that's what's a really important start point for us to think about in terms of working with cancer.
They're great points. Could you maybe tell us a bit about your cancer diagnosis and treatment and how you're doing at the moment?
Of course. So I had a primary diagnosis at the age of 37, 11 years ago, so you can do the math. And I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old who I was still breastfeeding. And so the diagnosis was passed off as pregnancy related issues that I was having. I went through a whole journey there: chemotherapy, surgeries, radiotherapy, etc.
And so that was breast cancer you had, Lynne? Yeah.
Breast cancer, yes. And then I have gone through the last 11 years never being off treatment. So there's always been something that I've been, an operation I'm preparing for or recovering for, a systemic treatment, etc. And then in 2018, I hurt my hip just coming out the shower, didn't think anything about it. And at A&E, they discovered that my breast cancer had gone to secondary incurable breast cancer at that point in my bones. So I've lived since 2018 now with the knowledge that I will not get better. This is incurable. This is long-term systemic treatment. So it's not a case of working with some chemotherapy and then I go back to work and life goes back to normal. This is my life, and I've had to get used to that. And so since then, I've had different treatments. Treatments work for different people for different lengths of time. Some work very well for individuals and don't work well for others. Some you feel well enough on, some of them you really don't. And I think we'll come to some of the challenges that brings. But that's where I am now. I do have further progression. I'm actually off work as I speak to you at the moment, just recuperating from an operation. So, but I have worked for 3.5 years at, a senior level, and
it's amazing.
So so you can. I think it's one of these things that it changes all the time, and it's just about working with the individual.
So talking about that, what are the main challenges that you faced in managing your work and cancer, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, so there's a lot wrapped up in there, because obviously the challenges you face outside work are going to what you face inside work and vice versa. I think for me, as a person, the biggest thing I would say is I've had to get my head around the fact that cancer chose me. I didn't choose cancer, and I didn't change as a person. It's just my physical ability to do some of what I want to do has been curtailed. And I've really sort of had a journey myself to get my own head around that. I still am a very career-driven person. But being a mum gave me a different aspect to that, but also being ill has made me think about it differently as well. So that first and foremost is the biggest thing, and actually probably not making my own life harder than it needed to be by overcompensating for what I wanted to achieve when I wasn't in the same place as I had been. From a work perspective, the things I find hard will sound flippant to some people, but for me, because my work is really, really important to me, I feel such a connection to what I do. I'm passionate about it. And when you work at the sort of pace and the levels and the strategic levels that we work at, you often talk about 3 to 5 year strategies.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be here to deliver my 3 to 5 year strategy. And one of the challenges I've had is I want to look far out because I want to do the work I do in the context of achieving behavioural and systemic change. But at the same time, I'm in a hurry to make a change because I want to see that change. And it's quite a difficult balance, because if you just do lots of tactical things, you don't get the cultural change that you want to do. So that's been tricky for me to navigate, just having a different perspective from others. And outside work, I think something like this really does dent your confidence and your commitment. So, you know, when we joined this call before we switched record, I said to you just a small comment, which is about you commit to something, but you're committing in the face of not knowing how you're going to feel that day. And therefore, will I be confident enough to do it because I've been out the workplace, or I might not feel quite myself. So that's a challenge. And the last point I would just make is about the logistics, the juggling, the appointments, the scans, the stuff that you see, the stuff that you don't see that your colleagues in this situation are dealing with. And that can be incredibly tough, just to make sure you're keeping all the plates spinning at home and at work as well.
Yeah. Were there any big changes that happened when your cancer came back with regarding working?
Yeah, so I had already worked since I had my children flexibly. So I felt that if somebody in the job that I do, diversity and inclusion, couldn't show that there was different ways to work, then actually who was going to kind of role model that? So I've always done that. What I did was it's mainly practical things that really help. One is thinking about your work pattern. So I had structured my work pattern around what worked for work and what worked for my children's hobbies. Yeah. And I had to take a step back and say, and when are my appointments going to be? And when am I not going to feel, you know, if I have my treatment on that day, I'm not going to feel well on that day. So that was a very practical thing, just to shift things around and to have very straight conversations about what you need. And I found working with cancer, working with Maggie's support groups, helped to articulate what I needed, but what I could still offer. Because I've worked for 11.5 years and contributed, you know, a good performance level for all that time. So it's not that I couldn't contribute and I wasn't asking for favours, but I was asking for the conversation about how do we make this work for the company and how do you make it work for me as well. So learning to getting your messages right and just having really straight conversations, but thinking about it as a win-win rather than as asking for a big favour here and you're not going to get anything back from, you know.
I guess it's asking your employers not to write you off because your cancer's come back. You can still contribute. You're still very good at what you do. You just need to do it in a different way.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the misunderstandings that we have, and we'll come on to some of my asks, is we think about flexible working and agile working and the return to workplace, well, it's not even COVID, as a certain way of working. I think we need to just get really creative and really flexible about what that means. So, you know, I would find myself on a treatment, sitting at the hospital, working a full day. I just couldn't be on Zoom calls all day because I was in a hospital ward.
Yeah.
But actually I was doing a full day's work, or I was catching up, you know, at different times.
Yeah.
So just really thinking out the box about what that could look like.
Yeah, because you spend a lot of time in hospital waiting for things to happen that you can use to be productive, can't you?
That's right, that's right. And actually it gives you a bit of downtime, quiet time to, I tend to keep a little stack of articles or things that I want to just get half an hour to read, that it's not 10 minutes in between Zoom calls where you're trying to get your cup of tea as well.
You can't, can you? The tea and the tea break.
Yeah, so so there's just different ways to do it, and it's just thinking like that.
They're great ideas. Was there anything that your employers or your colleagues did that was actually really helpful when you went back to work?
So I think the main point to make there is the journey I've been on is a journey. So, you know, it's getting your primary diagnosis, being off with your diagnosis, returning to work, getting your secondary diagnosis, and then where I find myself now. And at each stage, I find there's some things that are consistent, but some things that are just practically and emotionally really helpful. So if I think about a tiny example, sticks in my head about when I was going back to work after primary diagnosis. I had very little hair, I'd lost all confidence, somebody else was doing my job because they were covering it. You know, my pass had been, you know, just what's the word, not taken off me, but disenabled because I've been off for such a long time. Yeah, and my colleagues did little things like came to meet me at the door and walked me through the floor. And by the time I got to where my desk was, I'd said hello to so many people, and so many people had said, it's just so lovely to see you back, that I felt my confidence starting to come back. Little things like they would come out with my favourite scone from the canteen. I'm talking like little things that just made you feel you weren't forgotten about, you were connected. And I think that's my key point, is keeping somebody feeling that they're out of sight is not out of mind. They didn't choose it. Now that's emotional connection with your colleagues, but it can also be work connection. And I had a chief exec who I worked very closely with at that time. And he sent me, as he knew I was starting to come out the other end and I was just trying to get my stamina back, sent me 2 or 3 questions and said, we'd love to have a coffee at the right time with you. Here's the 3 things I've been mulling over. Give me some thought. So they were 3 questions that I could think about if I had half an hour that I felt like I had some energy. And it was connection with the work. And he was sending me a very clear message that you do this job. This is your work. I value what you will bring to this. And then the emotional side of just keeping that social connection as well.
It's so important, isn't it? I mean, I guess in a hospital, you realise if you don't socialise with your colleagues out of work, they may forget about you when you're not there because they wouldn't normally contact you. And it can be really hard walking into that environment after years and months have passed, feeling like a fraud and a stranger. That's
right. And I think the other aspect to that is there are very few people going through the same experience as you. So at work, you're all doing different jobs and you've got different challenges, but you're in an environment that's similar. You're working with, you know, the same colleagues. You're trying to really pull towards common goals.
I guess it can be quite hard. I know I found when I was off having treatment, because I didn't socialise with my colleagues, they didn't stay in touch because I wasn't a friend. And it was quite hard going back into that environment, feeling like a fraud. Would they remember? Did they know what had happened to me? How is it for you?
The whole journey can be incredibly lonely, to be honest. And I think I find myself falling between 2 sort of groups. One is the group at work where you share a common vision, you share colleagues, you're trying to pull together towards, you know, common outcomes. And then suddenly you're not part of that. And then the other group is I'm part of a couple of communities where I do have the opportunity to say, this is how I'm feeling today, either emotionally or physically. Does anybody get etc.? But they don't know the other part of my identity, which is, you know, and I get quite a lot from even my own friends, which is about, why do you insist on keeping working? And I'm saying, because it's who I am. So I think it can be incredibly lonely, and you can feel like you don't necessarily have that shared purpose with anybody. And I think therefore that connection becomes even more important. And just the other thing I would say is for the colleagues that I would say I'm friends with as well. If it's that, you know, I've always carried maternal guilt. If I'm at work, I'm not at home, and if I'm at home, I'm not at work. I think there's an element of that has come into it for me, which is we can't lose sight of working with cancer on the colleagues around the individual, because we're so incredibly stretched. I care for these colleagues as friends. They care for me as a friend as much as a colleague. And so I can often feel a sense of, you know, I'm not there, they're a pair of hands lighter, you know, how can I support them in the background, but not guilt, because then I might have to let them down at short notice and all of. So I think there's something very much in that message about caring for colleagues as much as there is for the person that's at the centre of this.
Because it must be really hard if they don't know anyone who's had incurable cancer to work with you on a daily basis. And I guess now, because you have your hair, you're not bald like you were in chemo, it's very easy to forget. And how they don't know what to say or how to treat you, or should they mention it. And it's getting those almost ground rules at the beginning to say, isn't it? When I'm at work, but if I need a wobble, you've got one person you can go to.
Yeah, and it's back to what I was referring to about you as me, the individual, being crisp about my messaging around this, how I want to be treated with it, because the relationship between work and cancer is really complex and it's really individual. So from financial perspectives, your connection to work, you know, how you related to your work before, the work that you actually do, is it physical work? Is it, I'm fortunate that I can sit at a desk and still do work, and how you want your life to be. So I am an incredibly private person. I do not talk about this. This is my second foray into talking about all of this. I find it incredibly uncomfortable because my life is private. And I've made a very conscious decision that I wanted my children's upbringing and our home life to be not all about cancer. I wanted it to be about a fun family life. And so it's getting those crisp messages and finding your allies. And for me, it was only, you know, less than 10 people that I said, here's how I want to be treated, and here's what I need to ask you for help with in doing this. And my colleagues have just been absolutely terrific. You know, they really have, in all sorts of ways, and you know, you can't thank them enough. And you know, you would do it back the way, but
you would.
People don't have to go the extra mile. But the thing about awkwardness, I'll just touch on very quickly, because it's a huge thing in and outside work. Cancer scares people.
Yes.
You hear 1 and 2, and it's not just cancer. I do want to reiterate, I am only speaking from one lens, but cancer scares people. And what you tend to find is a lot of people are uncomfortable, they're awkward, they don't know what to say. So you get into the situation where they tell you cancer stories, mainly of people that are dying. You know, they tell you, they use words that are intended to inspire you, like, you're so inspirational, you'll fight this, you'll beat this, you'll come out the other side. And a lot of it comes from, in my situation, just a lack of understanding. There are 35,000 people in the UK living with incurable breast cancer. 1,000 die every month. And yet we're looking at COVID stats that are comparable in a lot of, but people do not know what it means, and therefore you can't expect them to know. So I think there's something just about, if you have that upfront conversation and you say, look, we're going to have loads of awkward conversations, I'm always going to take what you ask me with positive intent, you know, because I get it wrong sometimes when I talk about sexuality or a particular religion, and I don't mean
No, and I think it's realizing they don't mean harm, they just want to help. And in the beginning you can get really cross. Actually, I now think it's just lovely they're talking to me and I don't take it personally, and it's just nice that they are still staying in touch. I guess for me, it's looking at you. No one would know that you had incurable breast cancer. We tend to imagine, well, I guess I did before I had it, it's a picture of someone in a hospice who has weeks to live, and you see they don't look healthy, and that's what the public imagine incurable cancer is. But you could live for years like this, and it's just changing that perception. Does work make you feel just like Lynne again?
Absolutely.
And you're not living with cancer, you're just Lynne, you have that identity, you have a purpose again?
I absolutely do. I've always been a very sort of purpose-driven person, and that's flowed through what I've chosen to do in terms of how I work and the jobs that I want to do. But I look in the mirror, and some days I look back and I think, how is it possible that I am as ill as I am? Because, you know, I don't look it. And then other days I feel like I'm dealing with 101 side effects all at the same time. I've got a big presentation to do. You know, I'm about to go on stage and I need to be upbeat and, you know, whatever it is. And those days I do find it incredibly difficult. So I don't expect others to know that I'm ill. And because I'm a private person, I can't expect people to know unless I tell them. But I don't want to be measured for that. I've been very clear that I've never wanted to, oh, she did that despite the fact that she's ill, or
judge her, you know, didn't she do well, but she's got cancer, so it's fine, she was off the game. It's like, you know, treat me as you treat anybody else.
Absolutely. And that's really important to me, that I'm treated in that way and assessed in that way. Because it's not about, I don't want it to be an excuse for a day that I've not done so well. You know, it's although I need to ask for that compassion at some point and that empathy. But I love what I do, and therefore I can go through a full working day and not even think about being sick. And that is just,
it's a gift, isn't it?
It's an absolute gift. And I'm just very fortunate, because I speak to a lot of people who don't enjoy their job, and that's different. I'm in a fortunate position that I can do it and I love doing it. So therefore I'm choosing to invest my time in it.
Do you have any advice to other people out there who have advanced cancer, who are trying to work and keep all the balls juggling in the air?
I think it's back to my point about it's incredibly personal. So the support groups that I'm in, you've got people who have never gone back after primary, people who have changed jobs, people who are having real difficulties trying to work with an employer. They want to work, but it's proving quite difficult to find a way to do that. And then you've got people like me that are able and in their job to do that. So it's not really a one size fits all for me. So what I would say to the person is cut yourself some slack, and just, you've got to do what's right for you and for the company, not what, just because Lynne Connolly's working in that way, or I look at somebody over there that's, you know, there's people who I look at their lives and they're spending their time on things I think I would like to be spending my time on. But at the moment, for me, I want my kids to say, Mum's doing this job, and we go on holiday and we do, you know. So you can always look to somebody else, but just get clear about what is right for you in your set of circumstances, and find a way to work with your employer over time, because it changes, it's messy, to just not lose your confidence, not to lose your assertiveness, but work with them to find a way to do that. And you know, touch wood, I've been incredibly well supported to do that through successive colleagues and bosses, and it just makes such a difference.
Fantastic advice. I guess follow your own path and do what's right for you. Any advice for the employers? What to say, what to do?
Yeah, I think keep that connection. We've talked about that, the emotional and the connection to work. I find it very difficult to work on something and step away from it altogether, and that's probably saying much more about me than, well, it is saying much more about me.
It is.
But when you're emotionally invested in something, it's hard not to see things. So keep that connection. I think seek advice for yourself. So companies like working with cancer, because because every individual is different. You'll have individuals that will totally hide this and individuals that will talk about it all the time. And it is just finding that way, maybe some facilitation from a Maggie's a working with cancer, Macmillan, whoever it might be, and looking after the individual's colleagues as much as it is about them. But the one ask I would have of employers and how we work in general is think about it as inclusion. Don't think about it as I'm supporting somebody with a disability, because your whole mindset that shifts from we've got to accommodate this person because under law we've got to do X, Y, and Z, to we've got Lynne Connolly here who's contributed 11 years to her life at this company because we worked with her to make sure she had what she needed to be included in that environment. So I think it's just taking it beyond it, so the default becomes how do we include this person in the workplace, rather than how do we accommodate this person in the workplace.
You mentioned disability, and this wasn't something I knew until I was going back to work, that every cancer patient is legally disabled by law, and I didn't know it, and my employers at the hospital I worked at didn't know it. Did you or your employers know that?
My employers did, but I didn't. And I also, I think through the journey, I wasn't sure at which point that fell off or came back on again, or what point, but I was left with ongoing disabilities anyway, so I was quite clear for me. I don't think the law is always very clear, and there are some people who need those legal rights,
reasonable adjustments.
I would rather we had a really open and just enabling conversation about what it's like to work in the workplace, rather than the law says you should get these.
It's very negative, and I guess it makes you feel that you are less able to work because you are legally disabled. And actually, I'm completely happy to carry on working. I just need to do it in a different way, and how we can make that a positive and enabling thing. I love that, Lynne.
And the reputation that brings to your company. I mean, I talk about inclusion all the time. Inclusion comes in all forms. It's not just gender, race, age, etc. It's all forms, and this is one of them. So, what that can bring to your company in terms of the forgotten sort of element of our workforce.
And I guess making, if the employers don't know that someone is going through cancer treatment, they can't help them, and making it easy for them to tell someone, I am having this. I don't want to spread around the company. I trust you to keep it private, but I do need a bit of help, because that can be quite hard to kind of fess up to someone and say, are they going to be gossiping about me because it's going to spread?
And she doesn't look ill. How can she be ill? And
exactly
what's going on? And you get
she's faking it.
And even though that might not be happening, you as the person think, oh, everybody knows what's going on with me. So I think there's something about having some trusted colleagues, supporting the line manager of that individual is absolutely critical. But doing it in the way that's right for that individual. So not a broadcast if that's not right. For others it is. I have met so many incredible individuals on this journey who are very open about their journey, are spreading the word, raising awareness. They are doing a brilliant job. That's just not me. So
it didn't need to be you. And I love that you don't need to do that, but you still need the same care and attention when you do go back to work. Are there any changes you like to see in the UK to help people with cancer, either primary or secondary, stay working if that's what they want?
I think it is just back to that piece about the default changing. But for me, the biggest practical thing we can do is think about how we work, ways of working. I think too often, we've been talking about flexible working as being part-time hours and the domain of part-time working mothers for so long in so many different sectors and roles. Flexible, creative, agile working is not just that. It's about you know, we've got this 5-generational workforce, we've got multicultural workplaces, etc. We need to be thinking really creatively about what we actually mean by the way we work. And what I'm finding quite sad to see is the amount of rhetoric there is about going back to the city, going back to and that's my world. Obviously, everybody's in different. Everybody back in the office because, you know, we've got to keep the sandwich shops going.
And that's how we've always done it. But actually, I work far more at home because I'm not distracted, and I'll do a solid 3 or 4 hours and get almost double the amount done.
I agree, totally. I have been far more productive when I'm creative and flexible and I can make things work for me. So I think that for me, it's maybe not a legal change, or maybe it is, I don't know. But for me, it's a mindset shift that we all need to, and it's not just a construct for working that has always suited one demographic. So it didn't work even before we went into COVID, far like anything else, you know, and I think that would be a great mindset shift. But I think the biggest message I would leave with is anybody, employer, colleague, friend, whatever, is what I feel passionate about is this is not about sympathy, this is about empathy, and the two are quite different. So when I get sympathy, it's things like, you know, people trying to find a silver lining for me, or well, at least it's not that. Or
the pat on the shoulder, the look.
Yes, all of that, and that doesn't help. When I'm talking about empathy, I'm talking about the person that's willing to climb in the big dark ditch with me and say, do you know what, I don't know what to say to you right now, but you just need to know I'm here for you, and I'm so glad you've shared that. And it's a subtle shift, but it requires in somebody a suspension of not going into what can I say to be sympathetic here, but just listening, just holding the space, and then being empathetic to how that might feel. And that requires a vulnerability, which is difficult for the individual to hold, but it's not about a pat on the back. It is genuinely just about, thank you for sharing, and I'm here with you, whatever you need. And that empathetic piece is whether you're an employer, whether you're a neighbour, whatever it might be. But I think that's at the heart of it for me.
And that's just brilliant advice. I think a lot of us are very bad at listening. We're too busy thinking about what we can say to join in that mutual conversation, but this is something you have no experience of. So just sit and listen and be there.
That's right. We're on I go fast for everything, and I think, you know, we try to maybe jump some of the hurdles of just listening, just absorbing, just suspending judgment. And I think that's what's needed in this and other sort of similar situations.
I think remembering a cancer patient isn't just a cancer patient. Don't take their control away. You are an amazing, incredible working woman. Cancer is just a tiny part of your life. And if we can help change that mindset, it might help the lives of so many people in the future.
Absolutely is. And it's not something the individual chooses. I would give anything not to be in this situation, but cancer takes so much control, takes all your future choices away. And I think, therefore, don't work with somebody in a way that takes even more of their choices away, despite the fact you're doing it with the absolute best of intent, you know, to try to lighten the load for that individual. It just makes the cancer patient feel like even more has been taken away from them, and, you know, they've suddenly turned from this competent and, you know, confident person to other people have to make decisions for them, and it doesn't feel good.
No. Not at all. We need to empower people.
We do.
Thank you so much, Lynne, for speaking to me today. We've learned so much, and hopefully we can really make a difference in the workplace.
Thank you. And I hope if people can just take one thing away from today's conversation and do things differently, then that will all be good progress. So thanks for the chance to chat it through today.
Thank you.